Anyway, the 10th Amendment. That's what we're going to talk about for a few minutes. And I want to read it to you so you have a clear understanding of what it says exactly. It says, the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states or respectively to the people. That's 28 words. The 10th Amendment to our Constitution, the last item of the Bill of Rights, 28 words that impact Arizona's immigration law, Florida's voter ID laws, Obamacare, and all of the other states' rights challenges that we just heard about. The 10th Amendment defined the Constitution where it says the powers not delegated to the United States. It set the tone that the power comes from us to the government. And as President Reagan so aptly said, it's not the other way around. We've forgotten that in this country. We need to get that back. And here to talk to us about the 10th Amendment and let us know how important these provisions are and what is actually at risk is a perfect person to do that, former Senator George LeMieux. Senator LeMieux was raised in Coral Springs, Florida. He's a husband and a father of 4. He currently lives in Broward County. He attended Emory University, where he majored in political science and graduated magna cum laude. He received a law degree from the Georgetown University Law Center, where he graduated with his Juris Doctorate degree cum laude. Many of us just graduated thank the laude, but anyway. He has been the Deputy Attorney General for the state of Florida. He's been the Florida Governor's Chief of Staff and most recently completed Senator Mel Martinez's term in the United States Senate. He is running for election this time in the seat against Bill Nelson if he makes it through the primary. Welcome, please, Senator George LeMieux.
Well, good afternoon. One more time, good afternoon. It's great to be with you here in Central Florida, Seminole County. I want to talk to you a little bit about my experience in Washington, frame it in the reference of our founding documents, and lay out for you the challenges that lie ahead for America. For 16 months, I had the privilege of my life to represent you in the United States Senate. For a public school kid whose mom and dad didn't go to college, to be one of only 100 United States senators, to represent 18.5 million people in what is and still can be the world's greatest deliberative body was a tremendous honor. But as much of an honor as it was, Washington is the most broken and bizarre and truly confounding place that I've ever worked. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that this government is out of control. You just heard Tico talk about the 10th Amendment and the rights that are reserved to the people. The other parts of the Constitution that are very important to that are Article 1, Section 8, and Article 1, Section 9, because they give reference and frame out what Amendment 10 to the Constitution means. See, our founders knew that our rights came from God. It's in the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident, all men created equal, endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that those rights, among them, are the rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And that government is formed to make sure that those rights are secured. See, when our founding fathers wrote that document and then later had a constitutional convention to write the document that would be the rules of our government, it was the first time in the history of mankind that that had ever happened. The first time when people came together and said, this will be our government. Remember, during that time and before, people believed that the rights went to the king and that the king got the rights from God and then gave whatever the king wished to the people. Our founders said no. The rights come to us, and we form government to secure those rights. And our founding fathers, whether they were Federalists or Anti-Federalists, were very concerned about the power of a federal government. Remember, they were fighting a revolution, had won a revolution against a strong power in terms of King George. They did not want a strong central government. They wanted a national government that would be strong enough, but they wanted most of the rights reserved to us and to the states. Jefferson said the government that governs the least governs best. Jefferson's view that the most important government in your life would be your local government, your town government, your village, your city, then your states, then the federal government. But it's now turned on its head. The largest government is the federal government. So what did the founders do in order to hopefully ensure that government wouldn't get too big? Well, first, in the very body of the Constitution, before they got to the Bill of Rights, because remember, when they drafted the Constitution, there was no Bill of Rights. They thought that everything they needed was in the Constitution. Later, Jefferson and Madison and others wanted to have these enumerated specific rights. But the original belief was that the Constitution itself had everything in it that it needed. So what Congress did is it enumerated the powers for the federal government. It said government can only do this, and government cannot do these things. Article 1, Section 8 enumerates those powers. They are enumerated. They are numbered. They are not plenary or full. Only what is in the document is what our founders intended for the federal government to do. Article 1, Section 9 says these are the things that the federal government can't do. And then the 10th Amendment says all rights, as you just heard, not herein discussed, are reserved to the people and to the states. My friends, when I was in Washington, I quickly saw that this document is not operative for most members of Congress. This government is so large, so intrusive, that it has changed the very nature of what it means to be an American. You know, for us, we're supposed to have our local government managing anything that we wouldn't be able to manage in our community, our church, our synagogue. But the folks in Washington believe that in a big government liberalism sort of way, that every problem should be solved by Washington. That for every challenge there is a federal solution. And that does two things. One, it puts the government in all aspects of our life. So our religious freedoms are challenged under Obamacare. When the Catholic Church does not want to violate its own precepts, Obamacare says you must. Now we as individuals under Obamacare, if we don't have our own health insurance, we're fined. Far beyond any idea of the extent of the power that our founders intended. I told you there's two problems with it. One is the intrusiveness and what it does to who we are as Americans. The second is this. When a government is that big, it costs a tremendous amount of money. When I was sworn into the U.S. Senate on September 10th of 2009, the national debt was $11.7 trillion. Today it's 15.6. It has gone up $3.9 trillion. It'll be 4 probably tomorrow. I have to keep updating my remarks because the number gets bigger almost by the month. $4 trillion in 3 years. $5 trillion since President Obama became president. It's gone up $10 trillion since Bill Nelson was sworn into the U.S. Senate in 2001. Now, I want to give you some historical perspective about this. It wasn't until 1980 that this country went $1 trillion in debt. What's the debt? The debt is the accumulation of all the deficits over time. So if in any given year you spend more money than you take in, that's your deficit. Add all those deficits together, it's your debt. So if this year we spend $1.3 trillion more than we spent last year, which we will, that's our deficit. The debt's the accumulation of all those. So from 1789 to 1980, nearly 200 years, through world wars, civil wars, stock market crashes, $1 trillion in debt. Now, each and every year, we go an extra $1 trillion into debt. It is absolutely unsustainable. Our interest payment alone is $225 billion. It wasn't, in 1962, I believe it was the first year that we spent more than $100 billion in terms of our federal government spending. And now our interest payment is more than twice that. By the end of this decade, if we do not curb the size and scope of this federal government, we will not be able to make our interest payment. Can you imagine? Can you imagine, first of all, that we're the United States of America and we owe foreign governments money? $1 trillion to China, hundreds of billions to Japan. Can you imagine a day when this country can't make its interest payment? If you don't think it can happen to us, look overseas. Look what's happening in Greece, in Portugal, in Spain, in Ireland, and other European countries. It will happen here, and it will not wait 20 years. It'll happen here this decade if we don't change our ways. That's why this is the most important election of our time. Now, I'm a lifelong Republican. I've been involved in Republican politics my whole life. I was a teenage Republican, college Republican, young Republican. I was the chairman of the party down in Broward County, which is like being the one-eyed man in the Valley of the Blind. And I've heard a lot of people come up to a microphone just like this and stand on a stage just like this one and say, this is the most important election. This is the most important election. If we don't change the presidency, if we don't take back the U.S. Senate and start balancing our budget and start getting back to the federalism that our founders intended and start limiting the scope of this government so they don't interfere with job creators and entrepreneurs and they don't bankrupt our children, each one of us now owes $50,000 in debt if you take that debt and apportion it out. Let me tell it to you this way, because I find we use these numbers like trillions and billions, and they're so big that you can't understand them. If you were to spend $1 million a day, $1 million a day from the birth of Jesus Christ until today, $1 million a day for 2012 years, you would not yet spend $1 trillion. This is an enormous amount of money. This is the cause of our generation. Every generation of Americans has been called upon to face a threat, internal or external. Certainly the greatest generation did with World War II. This is our challenge. Will we reduce the size and scope of this government? Will we start to balance our budget? Or will we let this get away from us? And will we crash our economy and change our way of life? Will our children, as most people in this country believe now, inherit an America worse off than the one that we inherited? I hope not. It doesn't have to be that way. You know, each of us of Americans has this responsibility to make sure that our kids do better than we did. I believe we can do it. I am hopeful and optimistic. These are very heavy things that I've laid upon you this afternoon. But if we elect the right people to the Senate, if we elect the right people to the House, and if we replace this president, we can take America back. There's nothing that we as Americans cannot do. We fought Imperial Japan and Nazi Germany at the same time, and we beat both of them. We put a man on the moon right here from Florida. And in our spare bedrooms, in our garages, and now even our dorm rooms, Americans are creating the greatest inventions the world has ever seen, building the best businesses the world has ever known. Businesses which employ millions of people and allow those people to pursue their dreams. We are that shining city on the hill that Reagan talked about. We are that last best hope for man that Lincoln spoke of. We are that nation upon which God shed his grace. I'm running for the U.S. Senate. I would appreciate your vote on August 14th. I'm in a primary with a guy who's got 100 years of name recognition. But if you'll go to georgeforflorida.com or come to our booth here in the back at the table, I would really appreciate the opportunity to have you help us in our cause. If you send me back to the U.S. Senate, I will fight for a balanced budget. I will fight to limit the size and scope of the U.S. government. I will serve only 2 terms because the challenge in Washington are people who want to stay there forever. For me, Mikey, and our 4 kids, this is a commitment we will undertake because we want to make sure that America continues to be the land of the free and the home of the brave. God bless you, and thank you very much.